Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. You all are in for a treat. I'm so excited. Just allowing folks in. If you've been in any of my conversations with the Black women photographers community, then you know the drill. Drop in the chat where you're tuning in from. Always love to see where people are watching, and we'll get started in a second. Yay, one person has their camera on. Thank you, Ashley. It's nice to see people's faces. Hey, Tiffany. Hello, everyone. We'll get started in a second. Just allowing people to trickle in. New York in the house. Amazing. I love it. Detroit in the house. Welcome. So Holly Marie, hi, welcome. Like I said, thank you. I love always talking to you, hearing from you, because you are just a breath of fresh air, and I just love it. So thank you again for joining, being a part of this conversation series, and shout out to Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom, for helping make this possible. Holly Marie, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to see so many people joining as well. I'm excited.
Yes, I know you have this special presentation that you wanted to dive in. Do you want to start with that? Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I thought the best way to introduce myself was to share some work. So I'm going to share screen. I'm sure we're all used to Zoom by now.
Yes.
Okay, hold on. Yeah, you let me know if I should begin or wait. What do you think?
Feel free to do your thing. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm Holly Marie Cato. I'm a photographer and filmmaker from London. Oh, and please, like, guys, if you want to stop me or ask a question, that's fine. I can just like flow through this. It's not a problem for me. So yeah, I'm a photographer and filmmaker from London. And my work, at least pre-COVID, involved a lot of travel. This is seen from Hong Kong. But I like to say that at the heart of it, even though it does involve a lot of travel, it's always travel with a strong emphasis on like people and a human perspective. This is a scene from India where I was traveling through the far desert. And then I was delayed waiting for a train that ended up being delayed 5 hours in India. And so I got to meet this mother, and I love like stories that I guess transcend no matter where you are. I think we've all experienced like a mother's love for her child. So yeah, it's always a strong emphasis on people. This is a project with the US Embassy, and it was year one of the Trump administration. And we got sent there to explore American values. And part of that was getting to meet these guys who are like construction workers from New York. And then going to my first rodeo. It was definitely like a broad spectrum. And I guess like a large part of my work is from my background in architecture. That's what I studied at school. And I actually saw my friend Sujin Lee, who studied with me, who's like in this chat. And like a large part of that work was before you design anything in architecture school, you always observe how people occupy space and how they use the buildings or the spaces that they're in. And I think like beyond like just capturing the layers and energy of a city, this is Hong Kong, London, and Lagos. And I think like these all capture like really like the energy and layers of the city. I guess a large part of my work and where my background of architecture comes in especially through my street photography, it's always an exploration of how people occupy space. How do they use the world around them? That's the thing that I love most about street photography. It's always like, you never know who you're going to meet or what's going to happen. But I love just observing who is in the city. This is a scene of from Harlem, and this gentleman that really loved his dogs. He actually had two of them. And I love the fact that they match his suit. And then Kaniki, a street performer in Trafalgar Square in London. This was from Jerusalem. This was always unusual because there were three guys who were performing just to themselves. And so I took their picture and then got to say hello and meet them. And yeah, I think my work is like a constant understanding of how people occupy space, the city of London. This was 2 doors down from my dentist. So I just like visited my dentist, walked by, and then saw this guy. And I loved the fact that he turned the front of his house into a carpenter workshop. Where he was making these pyramid structures. And then this got chosen for the British Journal of Photography's Portrait of Britain. And it ended up in the first book that they've made. Yeah, and more light and architecture. And this was a project for the Seoul government, for the tourism, just exploring like new and old parts of Seoul. And I guess like more recently, this was a visual that was for Sarah Everard. She was a woman that was tragically, I don't know if they've confirmed it, but it's alleged that she was killed by the police. And so women came out to pay their respects. And she was walking through a park in a quite safe and wealthy part of London as well. So it was kind of a shock. And so I captured these images, and I guess like you could definitely feel the heartbreak. And part of that, this got, what was it? This got commissioned by The Cut, which is like the women's section of the New York Times. Oh, sorry, not New York Times, New Yorker mag, yeah. And I guess our unexpected point of that night was like the heavy police presence. And it's something no one really expected, was the police to then start arresting women who were there to like pay their respects. And on a lighter note, I guess a large part of my work has always been about championing women, and especially championing resilient women. And I think no one embodies that more than Wada. She's a refugee from Syria who escaped her country, traveled to Zaatari camp, which is like one of the largest camps outside of the Middle East. And then by her own determination, got a job for the first time, and ended up working. I think she's now one of the managers at a garment factory. And this was captured for International Women's Day for the North Face. We filmed, I directed a documentary across the Middle East in London, and pictures were in store. And I guess North Face part of this was the fact that they now use this garment factory as one of their main suppliers, and it helped for the factory not only to be built, but for women in this desert town of Al Hassa to get first-time employment. And so that was a really cool project to be a part of. And these are just like stills from the video.
So incredible. Just to pause you real quick, just to share this comment in the chat. You have so much love in the chat. Leah Jones says, you have an amazing ability to capture emotion / condition. You know, how do you go about that process? Because I completely agree, and we see it in your work.
I think like the main thing, I remember being on photographing, say, this project and directing it. And I remember like the client being like, wow, you're so good with them. Like they're so, simply because like I learned how to greet people in a native language, and I learned everybody's name. I don't want to have to say, oh, get interview too. I should be able to say, oh, Oriana or Rabina, like it's your turn. And I think like just being intentional enough to, hey, let me learn everybody's name. let me take time to be able to say like salam alaikum and just like really small things, because everyone matters. Like, it's not a job, they're still people, right? And I think it's remembering that above like the commission, above the paycheck, you're talking about somebody's life often, especially in the work that I do. And I'm talking about sometimes the most sensitive parts of their life. Like, Wada literally was talking to me about the death of her husband and being now a widow with 2 sons, and me learning like culturally things. Like, it's such a patriarchal society where she's from that children are called orphans simply if their father dies and they still have a mother. And so like learning those intricacies of why was it such a stigma for her to work in a factory, because people in her community don't hold jobs. And I think like that's just like really important, is just being intentional and realizing like, yeah, these are people's lives really.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, you would think it'd be common sense, but I totally agree with what you're saying. Ash asked in the chat, how do you go about, making these images? Do you take your camera everywhere? I thought it was interesting. You caught that picture of the guy after visiting your dentist.
Yeah, so I definitely have gone through periods. I used to carry my camera everywhere, and especially when I had a bigger camera, man, the backache I started to get. So like, oh, I learned the hard way of like, okay. But no, I think carrying a camera with you everywhere, and even if you don't have a camera, everyone has a phone, right? And some of my favorite images, which I hope to share on our like on the Instagram takeover, is going to be like mobile photography, because they've been some of my favorite images that I've ever taken. And I think, yeah, if that's the camera you've got on you, use it. And just like always be willing to strike up conversation, really.
Thank you, thank you. Feel free to continue.
Yeah, so um, I've continued to do a lot of film work. That's something I really love. I would love to see more women filmmakers, and they're definitely out there. I just don't think we necessarily get the same opportunities. This was a project that I captured with Lumix, and they were just like, go and tell stories. And so one of the projects was about exploring what color meant to a group of creatives, which was fun, and like seeing what they had to say about it. And then I got to like mess about with color light, because that's something that I just wanted to do. And that image in the yellow always reminds me of that Apple iPod advert. I don't know if anyone remembers it. Yeah, so I just got to have fun. More recently, I've been capturing people in lockdown. Thankfully, we've just left it. We're like on week 2 out of lockdown, hopefully the last. And that's been fun. A lot of these images have been like captured on film camera, which I've just been really enjoying. And just like seeing observations and like signpostage. And then what was cool about this project was it ended up being picked up by PBS out there, the news group, that they're doing a project with that body of work that I captured. And I guess like none of us are unusual to what happened during last summer, which was like the execution of George Floyd, the rise of like everyone finally accepting that, oh, Black Lives Matter isn't controversial, it should just be freely said and supported, right? And so like I was capturing this because race in Britain is very, and racism is something that's prevalent and always denied and never spoken of. And so like I thought it was really important to go out there and capture what was happening.
Absolutely.
And and I think I'll say go.
No, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
And I think with like these images, I put a strong focus on like women's presence in the march, women's anger, women's rage. Like this woman who is someone who is disabled, she's in a wheelchair, and yet she still turned up to supply people with masks so they could protest as safely as possible. And like a mother's love, the fact that and I think it often goes overlooked, the fact that the Black Lives Matter movement was started, a lot of protests, a lot of movements and activism is started by Black women. And yet like that is often lost in the conversation. And I thought it was important to also capture like Black joy, because it doesn't matter what we go through, people always find a chance to celebrate the random moments in between of like Madonna showing up on crutches, or yeah, just like Black women being powerful, really. But yeah, stop me whenever. A point that I've always made is to give back and to teach. And so like I've worked with different arts charities for a number of years. It's just like some BTS. And this project was about exploring Black Tudors that got written out of history. Um, and so what was cool was I took a bunch of women through different projects where it was like, okay, this is how you physically use your camera. This is the exposure triangle. Now I was teaching them how to pitch for a job. Then they got given a budget and got given props and how to set design and like use basic lighting, which was just really cool. For me to at least witness their growth. And then after that, a number of the women continued, and I got approached by Adobe to do, which is really nice of them, even putting on this, right? To do a project which was all about play and about how people capture play. And so they had come up with a number of ideas based on my work, but at the same time, a bunch of those girls, young women who were a part of that course that had just finished after, I can't remember if it was 8 or 12 weeks, they were still in contact with me. And I was just like, okay, well, you guys want to do a project, let's put a project together. And it just so happened that as I was doing that personal project, Adobe approached me to do this. And so I pitched them and said, well, play for me is about when people come together. Play, in fact, brings people together. And I just wanted them to like really believe in the idea. And so I sent them, I guess, like a deck that we had made that we were basing our work off of. And they really liked it. And what was cool about that was then we got to capture these images, but it was my first time getting to not only work with all Black women, but getting to, all those Black women got paid. And you had a girl who said, I want to be a set designer. And I was like, yeah, go, do your thing. Another one got to do art direction. They got to like cast their own models and do their own styling. And it was so cool to be a facilitator of that. And the work kind of, I didn't even know it was going to end up being, but I trusted that it was going to be something beautiful. And from that, my friend who did the set design now is like a regular set designer for some really cool projects. And that's so great to see. And several of the girls are still taking pictures and doing like a myriad of cool things. Yeah, so I just think that was really important to include.
Oh, these are just stunning, as Ruth says in the chat, and others. These are just so beautiful. I need all of these in my walls. Oh my goodness, these are beautiful. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that process from going to like storyboard idea to conception? How do you actually execute that? And one, even being able to, bring on a team that this is all Black women. How were you able to do that?
So I think two things. I'd worked with Adobe now for like a number of years. And so there was definitely that build of trust, meaning to like give me more leeway to just do what I wanted to do. But I believe in like real world experience. When I went to university, I don't think it prepared me half as much for a lot of the real world things that I would need, not just like in my own field, but like business and even going into photography. So little is about creation, so much is about business. And so like I wanted to make sure that above, when we was running this course with the predominantly Black women through the arts charity, the one that I was working with was called Collage Arts. It was just really important that it wasn't just here's how you take a picture. It was like, let's give you real world experience of, well, this is how you create a mood board. And now this is how you create a deck. And this is how you pitch, because that's stuff they're gonna need. And so with this personal project that we were doing initially, they were fulfilling those roles. So you had Malika, who wanted to do art direction, and she took my initial decks and was like, now let me expand that 4-page deck and make it longer, which is something you would do. You would go to a client with a very short deck, just giving an overview and a feel for your project. If they then like it, then you would expand that. And she really fulfilled that role. Like, she did that. She started to hone in on, these are the type of fabrics we want. This is the color palette. These are the 4 looks. This is the time of day we would photograph. And I guess like a deck is just as detailed as you can give it to like put your idea across the client. I can't even remember what your question was now. I'm not even gonna lie.
No, you're fine. I was more so the process of actually bringing this to life, but you're explaining it very well.
Yeah, so Adobe, I think they had wanted me originally to photograph Notting Hill Carnival, because that's something I photographed anyway, which is great, but it's 2 million people. No, it's 1.5 million people in a very small part of West London, and it's a parade, so people continually moving. Now, taking pictures is fine, but now stopping people enough to sign a release form so Adobe can use your image is a whole different ball game. And so, like, I said, you know what? Like, here's a different project. I think you'll really like that. And I think the biggest strapline was, play is something that brings people together. And when play's done right, play can look like this. And then I had sent them images. And that was really like the tagline that kind of brought them on. And we had like example images of playing with fabric, or like playing with different colors and like things moving in the wind. And like we had like taken this old plastic thing and was just, and it honestly was an exploration of play. It wasn't too planned. Yeah, and that was it, and they loved it.
You know, you mentioned something that was really important, that you said that you built this trust. I mean, this client is Adobe, for example, but you built this trust with the brand. You know, what advice would you have for folks to build that trust? For that way, if you have like, not necessarily a creative difference, but if you have a different vision for this project like you did, and you were able to articulate that, and they trusted you enough to move forward with that, you know, how can others do the same?
So I just think, try your best to deliver on time, whatever your deadlines are, especially in the commercial world. Deadlines matter, and in the journalism world, right? Like, deadlines really matter. Um, I think often we're overlooked as like a second choice being Black women, but we come with a spirit of excellence anyway. So if you turn up and you do your best, it's gonna be enough. Um, and I would just say, like, always leave room in an email to say, please keep me in mind for future projects. Or, and I actively believe in, which is something like I never used to do half as much, is to follow up with, hey, just wanting to let you know, like, this is the work I'm doing right now. So that you're always on their minds, because they're rushing through like a million people's work all the time. Yeah, and I think like if a project goes well and they like it, they're going to want to work with you again. Also, do you know what was the biggest false narrative was, sometimes I feel like we are made to feel as though we have to be nice. And what I mean by that is, when it comes to business, I would always hear that like your agent should play the bad, let's say, cop, terrible cop, and then we play like the good cop. But in reality, and so like, okay, but back then I didn't have an agent. So how do I now like navigate? Am I meant to stick up for myself? Am I allowed to ask for more money? Am I allowed to like, and I'm like brutal when it comes to a contract. I will write 20 amends and expect it to happen. And with Adobe, that was no different. And so I think it breaks away like the false narratives that you can't advocate for yourself really to the ninth degree and go hard in those rooms. Because if they like your work, they're going to respect you. And I think that's the biggest takeaway with Adobe, is that they liked my work and they didn't care that I advocated for myself, that I asked for more, because they've continued to work with me.
Yes, yes, yes. I see a hand raised and I see a lot of great questions in the chat. Susan, did you want to unmute yourself and ask, or do you want to drop your question in the chat? Okay.
Also, if I should stop sharing, let me.
Oh no, you're totally fine. I'm gonna ask this question. Let me go back to it. I just all these great comments about how beautiful your work is. Adri asks, do you find that your framing your shots becomes second nature after a while, or is it always a conscious effort for you?
With this type of work, I don't do a lot of like anything fashion or beauty or editorial. So this wasn't like necessarily within my comfort zone. Um, so I don't know if it came natural, but like I think one thing that I do is I never delete work because there's images that like I personally overlook and I don't think is good, and then I come back to it after 6 months or after a year. So like I really liked this image, but I like totally overlooked these images first time around. I overlooked this, and like I think this is like one of my favorite images. So I think as my like taste improves and my eyes improve, sometimes I look back at old work and I'm like, oh, this was good. In fact, I'm gonna like whiz through and show you a big example of that. Is this project, which I just shared on Black Women Photographer. Now, I delivered to, this was captured for International Fund for Animal Welfare. And the elephant isn't dead. Someone asked that the other day. He's being moved. It's a bull elephant, and he was like anesthetized in order to be moved. And I remember like at first, I never looked at this image. It took me maybe like a year afterwards to go back through and to go, oh, I really like this. And I think I knew when I captured it, but I don't know if I saw, sometimes I don't see value in an image at first, or sometimes like this whole scene went by so quickly, this elephant being moved, being like lifted by a fork truck, that to tell you the truth, like after I captured all these images, I was like, did I do a good job? I don't think I did a good job. But like that, like continual analysis. And then I went back, yeah, I want to say even 18 months, you know. And I looked back and was like, I really love this image. This is one of my favorite images I've ever taken. And like this composure, yeah, it was very deliberate. It hasn't been cropped. In fact, I have another version where the guy's hat is like completely in frame. But I kind of always like the one where he's cropped out because I love the fact that you see him looking up at the scale of this elephant, but you can't necessarily see what the whole scale of it. And I think there's a part of us where like intuitively our eyes are continually, and we are continually capturing stuff, capturing and composing without necessarily like our consciousness catching up to that. Because like now I love this composition. I deliberately took it, but I don't think in the moment, I don't know. I think I'm better at talking about it in hindsight. And that maybe that's because the artist I am now has a better ability to understand that, no, you're right, girl. You're okay at what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? Keep going on. This wasn't bad. This wasn't bad work. So yeah, this project, this was captured in Zambia. I wrote about this on the Instagram page, but it was really important for me to like highlight people in the world of conservation who often gets overlooked. And like when we talk about conservation and we talk about anything to do with the environment, we've got your Greta Thunbergs, but like often it's comprised by a conversation with white people. When like a lot of this stuff is happening, whether it's in the Amazon or it's in the Congo or it's in Zambia, it's Black and brown people who are at the forefront of like saving the planet and saving animals. So this was really important for me to like champion Oscar, and his relationship with the elephants are so beautiful because within his work, like elephants actually see him as their mothers. So he will like orphan elephants whose like mothers have been poached. International Fund for Animal Welfare will rescue them. And in the same way that you'll see like a mother showing an elephant how to use this tusk to strip trees, elephants will show like baby Tuco how to strip a tree using his arm. And even when an elephant gets moved, he will often, into an adult herd, he'll often accompany them. So like they have that settling in period, because their hopes is that like elephants don't just stay in captivity, but they actually get released back into the world. And so this was just like a really cool project for me to be a part of.
Wow. Patrice in the chat asks, do you recall how many images you shot in this scene?
No, maybe 800, maybe 1,000. No, that's a lie. I think it's a lot less. I think it was probably like 600 images. But that whole day, like the whole moving of him, yeah, I think it was over 1,000, probably 1,500, somewhere like that. And like we were in deep in the Zambian bush. Yeah, that was seeing an elephant get moved, and you're talking about a creature that's like 6 tons. The closest thing to something Jurassic I'm ever gonna see, get like lifted by crane. And I got to learn so many things about elephants, like the fact that they don't have sweat glands. They cool themselves down with their ears. So when they go to sleep, you have to now keep them cool, whether that's like by using leaves and of trees or watering him down with cold water in transit. Yeah,
This is
definitely had.
incredible. Xavier asks, what is next for you in terms of projects? Is there a concept you feel like you haven't quite captured or mastered yet?
Oh, so right now I am definitely trying to hone in my skill on two things. Um, Shooting a lot more analog photography and like really knowing how to do that well, and directing, making films, whether that's me holding a camera or me directing. So I'm actually like the whole month of May, I think every project I'm doing is film related, whether it's me shadowing like a really experienced cinematographer or me on set capturing stills alongside the director, because that's something I really want to learn. Like I would ask people, hey, can I just be a runner on your set? And they'll be like, no, you can't be a runner. Don't be silly. But I was just like, there's no humility here. Like for me to be a better director, I need to be in that space, seeing not only how you work, but like literally seeing every role there. What's the difference between a gaffer and a spark? What's the difference between first AC and second? Um, and just for me to like also direct and to understand, okay, we're gonna need this filter, this matte box on this type of camera because I want this look. I'm never gonna know that unless I actually like spend my time grinding, even if I'm getting coffees at the start. So yeah, that's what I've really, because I want to get better at doing films, and I want to really like build a core team of people that I can trust with filmmaking too, because it would be so much easier for me to take on more film work if I have a solid team that is diverse. Because yeah, I think I can build a solid team tomorrow, but they're all white men, and I really want to build a solid team, and they're out there. I just need to find them. We need to work together and also learn how everyone communicates together, so we're solid and we're able to do more work. So that's what I really am passionate about.
First off, I think I already feel like you already do amazing work, so I can't even imagine like what would be if you got better. But I just love how you're always a student, always learning, and just always willing to be a sponge. And you're so humble about it. Elsie asks, what is a typical day like for you? One as a photographer, but then now as also a filmmaker.
So my days are a lot of emails, too many emails. But I wake up pretty early. Um, I'm trying now to do some form of exercise because we're not in hibernation anymore. Um, but I would say like it probably starts out on email. Only now, like Fridays, and I know it's on my least productive day. And I think that's just because like I can't do 5 days at home. Like, so Fridays I've now made like photography days. So there are days where I have to be out with my camera taking pictures. So even if I work for like that first hour, I'm out the rest of the day. Um, and I would just say to break up my days, because sometimes if I'm not taking pictures or I'm not on a commission, we might be on a Zoom talking to the team or whoever it is. But I just like need to really break up that. I think that's been helpful. So yeah, in lockdown, it's been a lot of Zooms, a lot of emails, um, but trying to like at least find a few hours every day where I'll go out, on most days where I can go out and take pictures for myself. And I guess one thing that I'm trying to do is to share at least a little bit more of that online, because I feel like I'm a giant hoarder of stuff. Like I'm just a hoarder of pictures, and I don't share half as much, to be honest. Yeah.
Um, there's a follow-up question, actually a few of them, but for you then, let me see, actually, let me go back to this one. There's so many great comments. Because Elsie, I know this is from Elsie as well, but they asked, what inspires you in your work? Like, what inspires you to, continue doing the work that you do? You mentioned briefly about, how education is important, helping other women is important, but if you wanted to elaborate more on that.
Black people inspire me, Black people's existence and our stories, and our magnificence. And that's like not cliche to me. Like when I even think about London and I think about London culture, the reason why you ask a Black person where they're from, they will never tell you England. They'll never tell you UK. If we're from London, we say London. And I think that's because so much of London culture is Black culture. And that's like, period. And so like when I think about everything that makes this city special or vibrant, whether it's like music or how we wear our like tracksuit and how we wear our clothes and like how we talk, all of that, like so much of that is Black culture. And I think that in the same way that you've seen like 10 million rom-coms, there is never enough exploration of like Blackness and all that it encompasses. And the fact that I can tell you, okay, here's a project about these men in Zambia who are seen as like elephant mothers. But I want to like see that. I want to feel that. I think travel inspires me because I'm always like having conversations with God saying, oh my gosh, but like, how can you create this? And I haven't seen it. I just want to like see and explore everything. I'm definitely that kid since I was a baby where for me to understand anything, I had to touch it. I had to see it. If there was something that you were told you can't touch, or there was a button, like never put me near a nuclear button because I would be the person to be like, mm. So I think like that, what inspires me is like the fact that I'm nosy and I love to explore, and definitely explore all the places that Black people have been and touched. And it's so much, and we don't get to see half as much of it. There's a city in China. There's a town. It's kind of like it's nicknamed Chocolate City, which is like whatever, because it's like filled with Nigerian people, and Nigerian people speaking Mandarin, and still eating like stew and like jollof rice. And yeah, I just find like those juxtapositions so interesting. So yeah, there's still a lot of the world I want to go to.
So you're now like at this position because you mentioned, how you get commissioned work. So you're now in this position where, these brands, people, you get clients, they come to you, but that wasn't always the case. So how did you go about, pitching yourself, pitching and getting that work at first? Like you had to start somewhere. So if you could talk more about that.
Okay, so my work, so how I started off as a photographer, because I said like I wanted to do architecture. I wanted to do that since the age of 7. Second year of architecture school, I was back home for the summer. And in between me being back home, I was sleeping till midday, as like most students do. And my mum kind of like burst through my room and was like, there's a theatre, they're doing a Christian play, some production. She's like, I want you to go and shoot backstage photography. It'll give you something to do. And I was just like, I'm not going, I'm sleeping. And like, I swear, like, I heard a voice so loud saying, get up. And I was like, to this day, I believe it was God. And I was like, okay, so I get up, I go down there. And as I'm like seeing like actors get ready and do whatever, and I'm taking a few pictures, by no means a photographer, I just had a camera because a part of my architecture course was about capturing like places. And in between me doing that, I see outside, this opposite a police station, some people gathering. And I was like, so I go out, I ask what's going on. And they say that they want to see the police chief. This man's been killed by the police, which is really unusual for us that a man has been shot by the police because our police typically don't have guns. And I was like, okay, this feels important. And so I started to take pictures and film. And they said, yeah, take pictures. Like, you know, no one else here. And so like intermittently, I'd go back inside, come back outside. And what ended up being like 20 people became 50, became 100, and ended up shutting down like the busiest road that leads out of North London to Central London. Later, we hear that the guy who was killed, I didn't even know at the time, was called Mark Duggan. And that ended up turning. And I think by the time the family realized that the police chief was not going to see them, didn't want to talk to them, so they only heard that their brother, cousin, father, whoever he was to them, had been killed by the TV. No one had reached out to them. They left, but through the power of social media, other people gathered and was angered. And so it turned into what was dubbed the Tottenham riots. And like buildings got burnt down, police cars got set on fire. You had like Molotov cocktails being thrown. It was like really a charged event. And obviously the press came once the buildings were burning down. The press came when it was like at the height of it. But I was the only person there capturing the peaceful side of it, capturing this build up. And because of that, I remember 500 people that night had actually gathered for the play. And so my mum had to work with like law enforcement to help evacuate those people out so they didn't get in trouble, didn't get arrested or whatever. And my mum reached out to the BBC and was like, do you want to do something with this? And I remember them saying like, no, we're not interested. But that event didn't end after the first night. Other cities in Manchester and Liverpool started to also have their own form of like, you know, this feeling of, I guess, frustration and like young people feeling disenfranchised. And so after this thing didn't end, the BBC kind of got back in touch and was like, actually, we want this footage. We want these pictures. And so it ended up being used in a documentary with Panorama. It ended up, in fact, in different news groups all across Europe. So it was like The Guardian and different news groups. I can't even mention them. And like even the audio with like film that I captured with very shaky hands was used on BBC Radio. And that was kind of my first experience into the world of photography. Now I still went back into university. It definitely wasn't like up. Like I had to learn how to use a camera properly. But I think after that, the biggest thing was, oh, I don't think I want to do architecture. I think I want to do this. And so a lot of it started off as mobile photography. And I built a following off of Instagram. And so for the first few years, I was kind of just milling about, broke but happy, taking pictures and traveling. And then slowly I got asked, hey, can you photograph this for me? Or hey, can you photograph that? And I wouldn't say I really pitched to brands, but one thing I was good at was upselling and negotiating. I negotiated my butt off, man. And I remember someone would be like, a brand would be like, hey, we want you to do it. And I was like, but I could do this, this, and it. And that was my gift really early on. But to be honest, the first few years, I didn't pitch for a single job. that is really come in later life. In fact, that's come like pandemic. But yeah, that's my honest truth.
So many good lessons in that and what you were sharing. I see a few more great questions that I'm going to try to get to. We are coming up on time, so feel free to continue dropping your questions in the chat, and I'll get to as many as I can. Shelby asked this earlier about when you were showing your street photography work. How do you make the conscious decision to solicit for a photo versus just taking it? And I think that also can come to I think that also works with, the work you were showing with the Black Lives Matter protests, the art of image making versus image taking. And I think if you would have any more additional thoughts on that, if that you'd want to share, I think honestly, that's why it's so important that we have our perspective, our lens, our gaze, and that we are behind the camera. But I don't know if you had any additional thoughts with that.
Yeah, so street photography is a weird one because, like, at its heart, it's capturing people in their natural environment. As soon as you kind of stop someone, that authenticity can be lost. I think the biggest thing, though, is that people's moral compass, knowing what to capture and what not to capture. And also, like, the editing doesn't, sometimes we think about editing as being post-production. Okay, this is how I'm going to crop an image. But editing happens from the moment you pick up the lens, like, and it also happens in what you choose to share. I did a project where I was working with a charity in India, and this was really early on in my journey. And I remember like capturing, there was a child who was young and had like burns down his back. Um, and I remember like capturing this and still knowing this is an image I never want to share because I'm capturing a child in a really vulnerable moment. Or sometimes with street photography, you'll get a lot of homeless people being photographed. And sometimes we have to realize, like, if I'm capturing that and I'm sharing that online, am I now sharing someone's worst day or worst period over and over again for the worst? Like, I'm making them relive that for the world to see. So I think that matters, is like what you're capturing and why. And I would just say, like, sometimes I will capture a scene and then go up to the person and introduce myself. It really just depends on what it is. But yeah, I think it is a constant battle of what's your morals and what is the purpose of this picture. And if it's purely for likes on Instagram and it's something that feels exploitative or sensitive, maybe it isn't something that you should be taking.
How have you seen, the world of street photography evolve? Like, have you found that people, are being more conscious of that? Do you still find that this is still an issue? I love your facial expressions so much.
I mean, we only have to look at the winners of World Press from now till 10 years ago. Like, um, I think it's still a field that's predominantly it's dominated by white men, and it's white men who, for the most part, a lot of them have not experienced a level of struggle or poverty, but are happy parachuting themselves into those places and capturing something. And I also think, like, there's a hero narrative that goes into putting yourself, like, literally flying yourself into something quote unquote dangerous, as if you've done something extraordinary. Um, when really we know the end of this is like people winning these awards and profiting from it. And I want to meet the fixers behind that, who are often like the local photographers who end up facilitating a trip for a white man to capture whatever he wants to capture. So no, I don't think it has been as progressive as it needs to be. Someone said poverty porn, and definitely there's a lot of that. I would just say that I am hopeful seeing a lot more Black people in that space. I would say that through the rise of, the protests around George Floyd, I want to say that conversation definitely increased and grew. And photo editors was made to feel maybe a bit more uncomfortable, that they have to hire people outside of their cliques and people who look like them. And so for the first time, like, Black people were allowed to have their photos seen, because we've always been telling our own stories.
Right.
It's just whether that gets published, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on that side of things, I think actually, yes, there has been an improvement. I think COVID has helped because not everyone got to fly in. So seeing like Black women get hired to tell stories in their own countries has been
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
One thing that you mentioned earlier, you said that you wish you posted on Instagram more. But for me, I don't even see it like that. I just think when I see anyone post even people who maybe post like once a month, twice a month, 5 times a year, whatever it may be, like, I just think you all are still booked and busy. I still feel like you guys are just very intentional about what you decide to share. And I wanted to know if you had any advice on, being intentional. Like, I feel like, the projects you take on, the work you decide to create, the things you say yes to, you're very intentional about what it is and why you do it. So do you have any advice for, the Black women photographers in this room and other creatives who are tuned in, especially at this time when I feel like brands and all these places are, reaching out to us, want to work with us, but how do we decide what to say yes or no to?
I think we just have to realize that by them partnering with us, as much as we can say it's an opportunity for us, we make them look good. We bring diversity to their table. Black people often are signifiers for what's cool. So we bring a sense of cool to that brand. And so like, know that there is an exchange that's going on and you benefit them as much as it might benefit you, right? And so like, um, I would say having that mindset, that's already intentional. Going into that meeting and advocating for yourself as much as you can. Question, like I did a portfolio review and my question was, hey, I would like to know the demographics of people that are showing up, because that's my intention. Am I now just going to be giving tips to people who already have the leg up, or are we actually going to help people outside of the space that it already caters to? Which is why I really appreciate what you're doing, Polly, and like Black women photographers. Early on in my career, I was really intentional of I post a picture every day. That was important. It was important to keep my website up to date. I was telling Polly today that like that's something I'm doing now because I've slipped on that, just because I've been working and doing other stuff. But when you are intentional about these things, it does lead to more work. My thing is about authenticity. Sometimes people are like, oh, how do I get paid to do? I'm just like, do the work you want to get paid to do. If your dream is like being an automotive photographer and like photographing Formula One, then you can't show and spend all your time doing wedding photography. Like you've literally got to build a portfolio about what you want to do. Sometimes when I look at my work, I'm like, oh, it's touching a lot of things. But I think like the very clear thing is that like there's a distinct bold aesthetic and it is about telling stories of people and mainly championing resilient women or championing Black and brown people. That's like what my work always encompasses. And so like that is the work that I was doing before commissions came, and that's the work that I will do, hopefully continue to do with commissions and after they end as well. So that's what I'm like championing about. So I think like just be authentic. If you're really interested in whatever subject matter, just make sure that that's the work you're producing, that's the portfolio you're building, and that's the work that you're sharing, because then the clients will come. And like as someone who's a strong believer in God, my thing is that like he creates you with your wants, your likes, your desires. And so if you lean into the very things that he designed you to have, then like it has to bear good fruit. Good things have to come from it. And that work will feed you. So that's what I believe.
I'm just ready to have daily affirmations like by you. Shelby said amen. Mario said amen. Someone said you are preaching. Yes, yes, yes. I'm here for all of this. There are a few technical questions that I'll try to get to real quickly. one person asked, what gear do you recommend? Do you have any, I guess, any suggestions for beginner photographers? And then what is your go-to, lenses and gear?
Okay, so my thing is, don't take people's recommendations. Like, you have to use it to know. I remember when people were like, get like 24 mil lenses was like the thing when we started. And so I was just like, yeah, look. And then I was like, wait, this is too wide for me. I don't enjoy this. So my thing is whether you can borrow, rent, like when I first started, I didn't even have my own gear. I used to borrow a friend's equipment, do a job and return it. Like, it was a complete hustle. And a lot of my equipment and some that I still own is secondhand. Like, or to be honest, because I love myself a bargain, there's two websites that I go to. Digitalrev.com, their store. I think it comes from Hong Kong. Often, like, you save $1,000, if not more, cheaper. And my favorite, I don't know if it exists, I think it exists there as well. mpb.com, secondhand equipment. Some of my favorite lenses I got from there. I stand by like saving $1, and they tell you also what standard that equipment comes in. So yeah, that's it. Currently now, my equipment is a lot more expensive than what I started with. So behind me, you can probably see, I'm now using Leicas. I didn't start using Leicas, and like, my favorite right now is a 50 mil lens, simply because I love portraits. I think a great starting point is a 35 mil lens if you want landscape and you want portraits. But everyone's eye is different, right? And so like it's about learning what your eye is. And as soon as you get close, as soon as you use whatever it is, I say a lens a lot, it becomes like second nature, and your camera becomes like a second arm to you. That you start seeing the world in the lenses that you use the most. I find that really exciting. And then when I get too stuck, I switch a lens and I'm like, I'm going to make you my thing. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I started off with a Canon 6D and a secondhand 24 mil lens, which I still own. I started shooting on projects recently, like film projects on a Panasonic. I'm now using Leica. So I just think use whatever you're comfortable with.
Yes, use what you have. I love it. Let's see, we are approaching time. So if there's any last minute questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. I want to ask you, how do you even find moments of rest, and how do you even try to create moments of joy in this time?
Polly, that was hard for me because I remember I was just like, yeah, I'm going to write this article for Black women photographer for launch. And then afterwards I was like, Polly, I'm dealing with anxiety and stress, and I've not slept. It's a huge thing for me.
Anytime you want to write that, there is no deadline. So anytime you want to send it over, listen, it'd be an honor.
Okay, that's good to know, because I was just like that. I should feel so. No, I didn't even realize I had anxiety until my therapist told me, and I was like, I don't have anxiety. That's stuff like people talk about online. That's not me. And she was just like, okay, one, let's unpack why you're trying to disassociate from that, to drag me. And then the other thing was like, this is your body saying that you're not acknowledging things that you're going through. And so like I had stress induced anxiety, and I like suffered from, what is it called? It's called.
Are you talking about dyslexia, where you were talking about?
Oh, I have dyslexia. Yeah, I'm dyslexic. But like, forget that. No, I suffer from high performance anxiety, meaning I can go bang out work, do a whole thing, and be like a mess, but no one will know it. So my thing is that like actually taking out time to rest. And sometimes my mother has to be the person to say, you've not rested in a while. And now, especially because a lot of work is from home, there's not that switch off, because there's not that change in location. So I have to be intentional. If everyone can work a 5-day week, you might be the person that can only work for 4 days. But I'm existing within my capacity. And like, I'm going to believe that whatever that gap is, that's the miracle gap. That's the space for God to move and do what maybe he will do for me that he hasn't done for everyone else. And I think that's been true. And recently, I got really into running. And running, like, my body is not a body of who you would traditionally think a runner is. And then I got a really bad knee injury that I'm working from, and slowly now I'm getting back into running. That's been something that's really helped my mental stress. I don't necessarily enjoy running, but I enjoy the endorphin hit after running. So running for me has kind of like saved my life, which I hate, but I also love and I crave. So yeah. Um,
Um, and there's still a few more questions, but I think that this would be a good one to end on from Elsie. What advice would you give your younger self?
to my younger self, the advice I'd give to my younger self is don't let any job or client stress you. Like, learn boundaries now. If you're working with a brand and they're in San Francisco and you're in London and there's an 8-hour difference, they've got to respect your time, because they hired you knowing that time difference. So they can wait for that email, wait for that meeting, because it's not worth you burning out. The project will get done. And I would just say, like, continue to live in the moment. Things will never be the same, but it's beautiful no matter what season you're in. Yeah.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I know there's some great things that you have coming up, but what else can people look forward to? How can people support you and your work?
You can support me by following me on Instagram. It's H_Cato, Cato. You can even tell me, girl, when you gonna post again, to keep me accountable. Yeah, and maybe one day soon I'm gonna release a print shop. I keep saying I'm gonna do it. I haven't done it.
I'm gonna remind you after this. I'm gonna send you my referral link for Darkroom. We're gonna get that print shop today. We need your prints. We need them.
Oh my gosh.
And a book and all the things. No pressure though. No pressure.
No, you know what? Like, good accountability.
Esther says we need a podcast too. We're giving you so much homework.
No, let's not lie. I've got like 30 episodes of a podcast that I haven't released.
Oh my god.
So I know, like, accountability. Yeah. So you look forward to the podcast. Yeah, I actually did a recording with Esther, who's in the group, Esther Sweeney. That was like so beautiful.
Love Esther.
Some more film projects. And I'm going to be a part of some exhibitions this summer. So that would be cool. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Holly Marie, for your time, your energy, your words, your work. We are so inspired by you and everything that you do. If there's anything else that you want to share, feel free. If not, we are out of time. So I want to be, mindful of your time and give you back the rest of your day. Holly Marie is taking over the Black Woman Photographer's Instagram. So follow along on the feed and the stories to see more of her work. Thank you so much.
Hi, Skinny. Hi, Yolanda. Hi, Esther. Hi, Dola. Hi, Sujit. Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's been beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Talk to you later. Bye, everyone.
Bye.